Love under the scope.
Welcome back to Love Under the Scope. This is a podcast where we will talk about all of the nuances, the ups, the downs of being in a long-term relationship, and all of the really beautiful growth moments that we'll experience, and the terrifying, scary, sad moments that we'll experience too when we commit to being with another human being day after day, right? It's not always rainbows and butterflies. It is always a commitment, devotion to learning and growing. And that's what we're going to talk about here on this podcast. I am Kelby Lauren. I am a relationship coach. I was trained through the Vita methodology. It was a great year-long program. I specialized in relationship transformation and also female sexuality. So I just love everything relationship related. I am passionate about, including connection, sexual connection, growth, transformation, all of these things. I love it all. Speaking of sexuality, we're going to be talking about that today. So we are diving right in on episode 2 into what I will call the sexual timeline of a long-term committed relationship. What does that mean? We are going to cover my experience of the evolution of our sexuality as we move through a committed relationship. And I hope to, as I share my personal experience, I really hope to touch on some of maybe what you guys have experienced in your own lives. And if not, hopefully it's a fun listen of a facet of the human experience. I've talked to friends, I've talked to other people who have shared a similar experience as me. And it can be kind of confusing to have some of these experiences. And so that's what I hope to uncover today is by sharing my experience, is there anything that you can relate to and maybe not feel as alone? Because I know that I felt alone in a lot of these situations. So today will be sort of a vulnerable episode. As I said, we're diving right in, and I am actually really excited to share this story with you guys. We're going to cover basically a 7-year period, and we're going to even go beyond the beginning of my relationship. I'm going to talk about my sexuality before the relationship because I want to demonstrate the transformation that occurred. So not only within my relationship, but previous to that. And it's just really cool for me to look back on those times in my life, my early 20s and late teens into now. I'm 30 years old. And so to be able to look back is really cool. So we will start. I've got my little kitty joining me. We'll start out with what I call in my notes sex before big love. So big love to me, I use that term because I have been in love before. I have had relationships where I felt love. I felt that I was loved and I did love these people. But when I say big love, that's like the love of my life, who I choose to share my life with, my partner, my teammate. That's big love. So before finding this big love, sex was sort of like a tool. I think I was taught by society, by media, just by messages that were given as young teenagers and preteens, especially as women. I can't speak to the male experience, obviously. I am not a male. But as females, and preteens, I think we are shown that sex is a way to get something. Sex gives you value. Sex, perhaps because of movies or TV shows, it's a way to hook somebody in. And so that is how I used sex for a large part of my life before meeting my current partner. It was a bartering tool, is what I'll call it. So I used it to exchange. I'll give you sex, and in return, I'm hoping that you will love me, and maybe you will confirm my worthiness. And so it was this exchange that was not ever communicated. I never said to my sexual partners, give me value, give me worth. No, it was a implicit exchange of goods, if you want to call it that. And so basically, no matter what kind of sex it was, it didn't even matter what it looked like, what it felt like, who the person was. It was always with this idea of receiving something. It's like I was trying to convince them to stay. Look, I'll have sex with you. I won't say no. Will you stay with me then? And I was so deeply craving that confirmation of my worth that it became a true ingrained system of receiving something that I wasn't actually receiving love, right? I wasn't actually receiving worthiness. That's what my perception was. I'd go out and look for somebody who I could have sex with and receive this rush of I am worthy and I am loved. And when that inevitably didn't happen, because that can never happen, nobody has sex and magically is like, I am worthy of love. That doesn't happen, especially if you're not in love with the person, right? So when that would inevitably not be given to me, not be received, I felt this emptiness. And it took me a while to go through that pattern to eventually be tired out and to realize that it was getting me nowhere. It wasn't working. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. That's how I felt. And the worst part is that it kind of gave me this jaded view of men. Men just want to take advantage of women. Men don't really care about women. Men just want to fuck, basically. And it's unfortunate because in reality, a lot of these men, men and women, we kind of are put through this system of beliefs around sex that in order for men to have value, they have to rack up a certain body count, right? And in order for women to have value, they have to be chosen. And so it's kind of twisted, right? Where both sexes are in this game, essentially. It's a game. Now, I do want to clarify that I did have relationships before my current one where I felt loved and I was sexually active. So in those relationships, that dynamic wasn't the problem. Sex may have been safer, right? Emotionally safer. And it could have been fun. It could have been exploratory, but that wasn't enough. The sex wasn't enough to keep the relationship going. At that point, it was a difference in values with those people that it didn't work out with. I want to clarify too that I have no regrets. I am not upset about the way that I learned about sexuality by having sex. And I had fun. I had a lot of fun. Mostly it was fun. And yet, like I said, it got to a point where it was tiring. It was no longer fun, right? I was 24 and I was tired of doing the same old song and dance. All of this to say, during this phase that I'm talking about now, this sex before big love, it was never safe. Sex was never safe. Even when it was with people who I did feel I was in love with, it was never on the foundation of safety, security, of being a commitment for someone. It was never about connection, love, or deeper spiritual meeting. I was always trying to get something in return. And that's how it was ingrained in me to have sex. It's a way of convincing somebody to love me, which never worked. So by the age of 24, I met my current partner. And this is the next phase, which I will call sex after meeting my partner. This is the next phase in the timeline. Funny enough, we'll actually go just slightly before I met him. Somebody told me that in order to keep a man, I shouldn't be having sex with them so early on because that was my tendency. again, it was my tool. It was my best tool that I had on my tool belt, was to lure somebody in with sex. It never worked, like I said. But this person said, maybe you shouldn't sleep with people so early on, because then they won't want to stick around. You've already given them everything they wanted. Now, I think this could work for a lot of people. I think for a lot of people, having that boundary of, yeah, I don't sleep with people until, 3 months in or whatever, the fifth date, or, everybody has their number, right? I think it could work for some people. But I wanted to mention this because me and my partner are proof that you don't have to do that. Again, maybe that's what works for you. Power to you if it does. But I think when I was told that, I felt some shame that I was like a whore or a slut. And I knew I wasn't. So I just wanted to share that right up front, that, yeah, I slept with my partner sort of early on relative to maybe what people would recommend. And here we are. We're going to be married next year. So that's proof that you don't necessarily have to have these rules in place for yourself. So once I met my partner, it was pretty normal from there. It was great. It was the typical honeymoon period after meeting somebody. You have sex all the time. You desire them a lot. It's pretty built in, everything's very natural. You are kind of riding that high of those hormones that are flooding your system and your brain and telling you like, yes, 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 yes. And you've got that person on the pedestal. You think they're just the best thing since sliced bread. And there's not this big emphasis on sex because it's just happening, It was fun. It was exciting. It was all of those typical emotions that you feel when you have just met somebody and you are really excited to connect. I will say that pretty early on, I felt safe with this person. We decided basically after the second date that we were exclusive. I don't even know if we actually said it out loud, but we both committed to each other after date number 2, maybe even date number 1. I don't think I was talking to anybody after even our first date because it was just such a great connection. And so there was some level of trust built in from the start. I didn't really know it yet. Looking back, I see that now. There's not much else to say about this time period. It was really fun and it was smooth sailing as far as sex goes. That's kind of how it works at the start of any relationship, right? And no shame if this isn't your story, but for the purpose of this episode, I'm going to move on to after the honeymoon period, right? That's kind of the main reason I even wanted to make this episode, is to address what happens after the honeymoon period, because that's where it gets a little bit more complicated to navigate. Definitely a lot more nuanced in my experience. So the first phase after the honeymoon period, I've split this part into 2, and we're going to touch on just as far as I've come till now, right? There's still so much that I want to learn and so much that I'm experiencing, but we'll split this next phase after the honeymoon period into 2 parts. The first part is the unlearning, or the limbo period. So this was an interesting one. So after all of that lust and that flaming hot desire started to wear off, and we're left with reality, right? That's after the honeymoon. That's what happens. We're a lot more in reality. We're seeing the truth of each other. We have this familiarity with each other. And sometimes that the desire that can stem from that mysteriousness starts to wane, right? Doesn't mean you love each other any less. In fact, you probably love each other more. That was my experience. I loved my partner more and more. I still do every day. But you're no longer pedestalizing that person. And so you might find that your sexual dynamic will change. That's very normal. How it happened for me was that I found my desire for sex became quite low. And that was really, really confusing for me. I had no idea what the hell was going on. In the past, my desire for sex was high, again, because I was using it as a tool to receive confirmation of being worthy and being loved. Because I used it that way, I wanted a lot of it. I wanted to feel loved all the time, right? So I perceived that I just really liked sex, but what I really liked was feeling loved and feeling worthy. So when this kind of lower point came, I was so thrown off. I honestly was like, oh my God, am I not supposed to be with this person? Is this not a match? Am I broken? Am I never going to want sex again? Oh my God. Very scary to go through this feeling, especially as a woman, maybe as a man too. But again, I can speak as a woman, to feel like, oh my gosh, I've locked it down with somebody, and now am I just never going to want sex again? Like truly want it, right? Not just be okay with it. Okay, I'll do it. Like want it, be excited by it. What I know now, what was happening in that lower desire for sex was actually a reprogramming. And actually, we'll call it an unlearning. So it was this limbo phase where I was unlearning all of the shit that I learned from adolescence about sex, that it makes me worthy, that it means that I'm loved, that it means that somebody will stay with me. And I always have to be using it to confirm that. Now, a partner came in who actually loved me very much, who was ready to spend his life with me. And no longer did I have to use sex as a tool. He didn't care that if I had sex with him, it didn't mean, well, I'm going to stay with you for one more day now because you put out. Well, I got at least 1 month in me since you had sex with me yesterday. No, he chose to be with me because I am me, because I'm Kelby. And so no longer is sex required. There's no exchange that's needed anymore, right? So if you have been using sex and your desire for sex has been built upon the idea that sex makes you worthy of love, and then you take away that need to have sex for that reason, wouldn't it make sense that your desire for sex would change? And in order for change to happen, a lot of the time we have to completely remove the thing. So if it's sexual desire, we got to remove it, take it out, like get it out of here. That's what was happening with me. They say in any kind of rite of passage or any kind of change, big monumental change, there is the getting rid of the thing. There is the middle part where you're in this limbo and you have kind of this emptiness. And then the third phase would be building on that emptiness. So I feel like during this period, I was in that second phase of emptiness. During this phase, where I had a very low desire for sex, I still had sex with my partner. And I feel terrible saying this because he had no intention of me feeling this way. He is not the kind to pressure at all. Very much just wants me to be comfortable. So it's unfortunate that at the time I convinced myself, well, even though your desire is low, you still have to have sex with him because that's what he needs. He's a man. You have to please him or else he's going to leave you. And I would say yes to sex basically because it was something I had to do. Got to clean the house, got to do the dishes, got to feed the cats, got to have sex. I'm laughing because it's like really sad, but it's also like you gotta laugh or else you're gonna cry. So I choose to laugh. You know, how silly that I could essentially have a household chore list and on there was to have sex. So what a drag. You know, sex is, in my experience, fun. It's playful. There shouldn't be pressure, right? And yet there was this huge pressure of, you gotta do it. You gotta do it. And definitely some parts of that are like around women's conditioning around sex. You know, don't give them blue balls. You know, don't make them wait. You know, it's all about the penis. So that's how I was. That's the phase that I was in at this point. Not really wanting it, not really having a huge desire for it. What came after this kind of low desire point was me starting to say no to sex. So kind of the power in saying no. Sex is a choice. Sex is not a thing that you have to do. Sex is not built into a relationship. Sex is not you don't owe it to your partner. By the way, my partner, again, was not pressuring me. This is a self-inflicted pressure that I put on myself. So this idea of the power of saying no and being received well in that no, right? By a partner who loves me very much. In the past, when I said no, I have had some interesting reactions to that. I've had people who, when you say no to them, the look in their eyes changes and suddenly it it's scary. I have had partners where I say no and suddenly it's please, please, come on. Let's just a little, just this or just that. So to say no and to be received in the no with total acceptance. No, I don't want to have sex. Okay. That's okay. That was huge. Huge. That was very much needed in order for me to move through all of the next steps that I'm going to share. So that was kind of a turning point for me. Another part of this phase was I was reading Come As You Are. It's a book by Emily Nagoski. Very good book. And she talks about this idea of when there is so much pressure on you, whether it's self-inflicted, hopefully it's not inflicted by your partner, but usually it is self-inflicted in a loving relationship. If you feel so much pressure, what if you took a break? What if you told your partner, no sex for a month? What if you needed 2 months? Could even be a week. I don't know. Depends on how frequently you have sex. Do you have sex every day? Can you take a week off? So this idea that we can have the relief from that pressure for a month, for 2 months, however long you need in order to be able to let some of that pressure go. And to know and to have, there's some kind of relief in this idea of knowing for the next month, I don't have to have sex. When you're feeling that pressure, there's a huge relief in knowing that. Like agreeing to that out loud, verbally. It's very comforting. And that also means that maybe there's some intimate moments that you have within that month, within that 2-month period, that are without the pressure of having sex. So if you're cuddling, if you're kissing, if you're just watching a movie, we're doing this knowing we're not going to have sex. So that's very, very healing for the person who feels pressured to perform. So I think this experience of saying no is very powerful, especially if you are a person who has not felt like you could say no before. So very, very powerful. Now, I don't know if it's healthy to stay in that phase for too long, because what I'll talk about next is the second part of the after the honeymoon phase, which I am calling rebuilding on a foundation of real love. So this is the next phase in the timeline. I would say this is where I am today. I could be possibly a step ahead of this. Sometimes when you're doing work, you don't really know when you're in it until you look back, and then you can kind of break it down. So I'm saying tentatively that I am in this phase now. This is where I currently am. So, rebuilding on a foundation of real love. So, after the experience of being able to say no, 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 and being my full bratty self, no. That's after all of that no was expressed, I think no stopped having that fun playfulness or that like power to it. And it became, okay, I don't really want to say no anymore. I actually am interested in deepening our sexual connection, and I don't want to block out this method of connecting with my partner anymore. I had my time. It felt good. It was empowering. And now I'm ready to move on. What came next was the embracing of a new perspective on sex. So there are so many facets to this. This is very, very cool for me. I'm going to start out by addressing that we are shown sex in so many different lights as a society. So when you go to the movies or watch TV, it can be very like passionate and spontaneous, and we're, ripping each other's clothes off and I'm throwing you against a wall. I think it gets ingrained in us that this is what sex looks like all the time. It's really hot and it's crazy and it's just mind blowing. And then we orgasm at the same time and it's just insane, right? if you're in a long-term relationship, you know that although some sexual experiences might be that way, not all of them are. In Come As You Are, that same book that I mentioned earlier, she talks about how desire no longer is the catalyst for sex at a certain point, right? If we've been together for 10, 20 years, is it always going to be desire? I just need you so badly right now. Is that always going to be the driving force for having sex regularly, by the way? Not once a month, not once every 6 months. I'm talking regular sex. No, the answer is no. Maybe for some couples, I hate making blanket statements. I'm sure there's like a couple who's been out there for 30 years having sex based on sheer desire. Good for them. I applaud them. That is not me. That is not most people. Most people find that it's no longer reliable to make desire the catalyst for having sex. So then the question becomes, what is the catalyst? Why have sex then? Especially for women. I did a TikTok video recently that was about how women, and this is Esther Perel that talks about this, women need a reason to have sex. So why am I going to have sex? I don't want to just do P and V and then we're done. Like, that does nothing for me. What do I feel when I have sex? What do I experience? Who am I when I have sex? Am I desired? Am I like a queen? Am I a goddess? What do I feel like exhilaration and all of these things, right? This is important for a woman. But I'm getting ahead of myself because we'll rewind way back to just rebuilding on a foundation of real love. So once I was able to say no to sex, then there was a shift in perspective. I read books, I consumed content around this, where we are going from sex because of desire to sex because I am willing and open to seeing what happens if I say yes. Sex because I am willing and wanting to continue to deepen our connection. Sex because I desire to express my connection with my partner in a physical way. So that spiritual, emotional connection that we have, I am willing and I desire to express that physically. That doesn't mean there are expectations that it's mind-blowing all the time. Esther Perel talks about maintenance sex. Can we have sex regularly because it's good for our connection? Can we accept that sex is a spectrum, just like connection is a spectrum? Depending on what we're going through, are we going through a stressful time in our lives? Did we just have a child? Did somebody just lose their job? Somebody just lose a parent? Connection will ebb and flow based on these life experiences. Sometimes we feel really close. Sometimes we don't. Sex will mirror our connection in our daily life. So can we accept that sex is a spectrum? Some days it will be, well, I just did it because I love my partner and I really want to feel connected to him. Other days it'll be, oh my gosh, we just made love and it was incredible and I'm pretty sure I met God, and all of the things in between. What about just having intimate moments? Sex doesn't always have to be had in order to experience intimacy. We can make time to put our phones down and ask each other meaningful questions. What are you really excited about? What are you afraid of? What do you love about me? What do you love about our relationship? This is intimacy. Can we offer each other non-sexual touch? So can we give each other a massage or scratch each other's backs without the expectation of sex? Maybe you want to explore genital massage, which is a technique that is not sexual, although you are touching sexual parts. There's no intention to orgasm or even experience pleasure. There are a lot of ways to keep the sexual connection alive even without sex. That being said, I do believe having actual sex is important. That doesn't mean you should have to pressure yourself into having it. If you truly do not want to, then you can say no. I did a video on TikTok about how having sex regularly is important. And even though I'm glad I made the video, it's out there, I really want people to understand the nuance of my story, where, yeah, today I would say having sex regularly is important. And I'm saying that after having gone through that period where I said no a lot, where I wasn't interested in sex. And I felt empowered because of the ability to say no. The coolest part about all of this is that sex is like a sandbox for life. What I mean by that is whatever we're doing in the bedroom will translate outside of the bedroom in our daily life. So if we are prioritizing communication in our sex life, that will translate to better communication in our daily life. If we are prioritizing connection in our sex life, it will translate into our daily life. Anything we do in the bedroom also comes with us outside of the bedroom. All of those dynamics that we work on in our sex life, whatever it may be, will shine through into our daily life, and vice versa. If we are not connected in our daily life, we will probably see it as a reflection in our sex lives. It's all very connected. Sex is not something that is like, here's our normal life, and then sex is over here. It's like all mushed in there. And it's kind of all reflecting on each other. So if we don't really trust our partner, sex is not going to be trusting. So I will leave you here, this final point about the sexual timeline of a long-term relationship. Can we open up to the idea that sex is like the foundation on which we will deepen our relationship so that we can thrive not only as a couple, but as a team, which will then be supportive to our family, which will then be supportive to our community, which will then be supportive to humanity. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is if you work on having a better sex life, you could be changing the world. And I actually do think that's true. I really do. Because it's all about connection. It's all about connection, presence, aliveness, and all of these things. When we implement them in ourselves and our relationship, they absolutely ripple and affect everyone around us more than you will ever know. So knowing that, are you willing to change your perspective on sex? If you're frustrated with where you are now, if you don't really understand what's going on, assuming that you love your partner and you're in a loving relationship, you can absolutely rebuild your sex life and bring that spark into your relationship. You can bring it back. If it was there in the beginning, it can be brought back, period. End of story. The first step, though, is addressing that we want more. You want more connection. You want more sexual energy, sexual exchange between you and your partner. And you can have that. I think that's all I have to say today. Thank you for listening. As always, you can work with me. I am a relationship coach. I am certified to work with individuals and couples to make change in their lives. So you want something. Maybe you don't know exactly what it is, but I can help you to get there. I am a guide. I help people, couples to transform and move from point A to point B. I am also going to open my inbox to questions. So if you would like to email me at coachedbykelby@gmail.com. I am open to receiving questions and I will answer them anonymously here on the podcast. I won't mention any names, anything like that. I'm curious what you guys would like to hear more about. Thank you again for listening, and I look forward to meeting again next Friday.